Hey guys, tonight we are climbing aboard a Viking longship, just as the sun lifts itself lazily over the fjord. The light bouncing off water that looks as cold as a phone call from your bank. You're standing there in fur-lined boots that are already damp, because everything in Viking life seems to be at least slightly damp. And you watch as sailors grunt and shift barrels, bags, and bundles onto the deck. The air smells like salt, pine pitch, and someone who forgot to rinse their tunic last month. You might be imagining adventure, but truth be told, if you're on this ship, you probably won't survive half as long as the fish you're carrying. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you'd like, post your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step carefully onto the plank, the ship swaying with the tide. The hull is long and shallow, built to glide across both open seas and shallow rivers. And every creak of the timber reminds you this vessel is made entirely by hand. No blueprints, no safety regulations, just sturdy planks held together with iron rivets and the hope that Thor isn't in a bad mood this week. At the bow, carved into a snarling dragon's head, there's the faint trace of paint still clinging on. You run a hand along the weathered wood and feel the grooves where countless voyages have begun just like this one. The men around you are busy, rolling casks up makeshift ramps, lashing down sacks with ropes that smell faintly of tar. The women, yes, despite popular belief, some women did join expeditions, are checking bundles, fussing over cloaks, and making sure their children are wedged somewhere they won't be accidentally kicked by an oarsman. The cargo is a fascinating mix. Barrels slosh faintly, giving away the presence of ale and water, both of which you'll desperately need, though historians still argue whether water barrels stayed drinkable longer than the ale. Wooden chests are shoved into corners, filled with preserved fish, dried meats, and flatbreads that are already hard enough to chip a tooth. Someone casually tosses a bundle of dried herbs on top, claiming they'll ward off scurvy, though the word itself won't be coined for centuries. Still, a little extra greenery doesn't hurt. The sounds are layered. Goats bleating indignantly as they're coaxed up the gangplank, hens flapping in wicker baskets, and the rhythmic thunk of shields being stacked along the railing. The shields, round and painted, aren't just for defense. They're also handy makeshift tables when you're desperate for a place to set your stew. A gull swoops low and snatches a crust of bread from someone's hand, sparking a round of laughter. One sailor mutters a curse and spits overboard for luck, while another carves runes into the wood, as if a few scratches will convince the sea to behave. Historians still argue whether runes had more symbolic or spiritual value, but the truth is, when you're facing weeks of unpredictable waves, you cling to whatever magic you can. You glance toward the mast. The sail, woven of wool, thip and square, hangs furled for now, waiting for the wind. Its stripes of faded red and white ripple faintly in the breeze, a banner announcing your presence long before you ever arrive at foreign shores. Beneath it, the benches for rowers are already slick with morning dew. Soon you'll be rowing for hours, your back aching, your hands blistered, and your mind wandering toward home. The ship itself seems alive. Every shift of weight, every slap of water against its sides resonates like a heartbeat. You wonder how many times this vessel has made the journey, across fjords, rivers, open seas, even raids along distant coasts. Some voyages never return. You don't think about that now, not if you want to sleep tonight. Instead, you focus on the immediate, the creak of ropes, the smell of resin, and the warmth of the rising sun brushing your face. Someone presses a horn into your hand, a drinking horn, polished smooth. For luck, they say with a grin. It's empty now, but soon it will carry ale, sour milk, or even rainwater caught mid-storm. You turn it over in your fingers, feeling the cool curve, and imagine the countless lips that have already touched its rim. Hygiene wasn't exactly a Viking priority. The ship rocks again, heavier this time, as the final cargo is secured. You steady yourself, the horizon a jagged line of cliffs and trees. In the distance, the call of another longship echoes, deep and mournful, as if the fjord itself sighs. Your stomach flips, not from fear exactly, but from the knowledge that you are stepping into a routine older than memory, setting sail toward uncertainty. You close your eyes for a moment and just listen. The gulls, the chatter, the splash of oars testing the water. The journey hasn't even begun, and already you feel the pull of the sea, the slow rhythm that will soon lull you into a daze. Around you, men and women continue tying knots, tightening straps, and checking bundles. Everyone knows the voyage is long, but for now, there's an odd cheer in the air, the way people joke before hard work. One sailor leans over and says, "If we're lucky, we'll be in Dublin before your boots rot." You laugh, though you know there's truth in it. Your boots will rot. Your cloak will smell like wet sheep. Your food will dwindle to scraps. And yet, here you are, stepping forward as the anchor rope is pulled up, the longship shifting into open water, and the coastline begins to slide away. The adventure has begun, and you're already half dreaming of what lies inside those barrels, bags, and bundles. The ship groans gently as it noses away from shore, and your feet adjust to the unsteady rhythm beneath you. Already you can smell the mingling aromas of the ship's provisions, some familiar, some less so. If you've ever wondered what dried cod mixed with sheep fat and a hint of smoked butter smells like, congratulations, you're living it now. The first thing everyone checks after launch is the food stores. Why? Because a hungry Viking is a cranky Viking, and frankly, nobody wants to share a boat with that guy. So you squeeze between stacked bundles and make your way to the storage area, a recessed midsection under the rowing benches where the most essential supplies are kept dry, or, more accurately, less soggy. You crouch down and peer into a wooden barrel. It's packed with fish, split, salted, dried, and practically fossilized. Stockfish, it's called. Cod, usually, beaten flat and air-dried until it rings like a plank. Delicious? Not unless you're starving, but filling? Absolutely. And most importantly, it doesn't spoil. This rock-hard seafood is the backbone of any Viking voyage. Near it, you spot sacks of grains, mostly barley and rye. Vikings weren't big on wheat. It didn't grow well in their climate. These grains will be boiled into gruel, sometimes with dried fruit if you're lucky. If you're really lucky, there might be a scrap of dried meat tossed in. But don't count on it. This isn't a buffet. It's a calorie drip feed. Now here's where things get controversial. The bread. Flat, round loaves made from barley flour. Dry, dense, and baked until nearly indestructible. They taste vaguely like regret and wood smoke. Historians still debate whether these were meant to be eaten plain or soaked in broth first. One theory suggests they were used more like trenchers, a plate you could eventually gnaw on. Practical, if a little depressing. But amidst the gloom of preserved foods, you do find one culinary oddity that perks your interest. Bee bread. Yes, bee bread. A fermented paste made by bees from pollen and nectar, stored in combs. Vikings harvested it for its nutrition and shelf life. Packed into little waxy pouches, it's sour, earthy, and surprisingly protein-rich. Not exactly a Mars bar, but better than gnawing old fish bones. Someone next to you unrolls a cloth bundle filled with herbs. There's angelica, used to fight off scurvy before anyone knew what scurvy was. There's also yarrow, thyme, and even wild garlic. These herbs are dual purpose, flavoring and medicine. If you're feeling woozy or the fish tastes extra suspicious, you chew a sprig and hope for the best. The drinking water barrels are tapped next. You fill a wooden cup and take a sip. It's clean, for now. Give it a week or two and it'll taste like mossy rain caught in an old boot. That's why many Vikings preferred to drink mead or weak ale on board. Not to party, but because the alcohol helped kill off nastier microbes. Imagine explaining to your doctor today, "Oh, I drink for the bacteria." Some barrels carry more exotic goods. Dried apples and cloudberries for the wealthy. Hard cheese wrapped in waxed linen. A lump of butter that's already gone slightly translucent. You poke it and quickly regret that decision. What's notably absent is fresh food. Anything perishable will be gone in a few days, tops. That means for the majority of your journey, your meals will be beige, salty, and chewy. Your teeth will get a workout, your digestive system may lodge formal complaints, but you'll survive. Probably. And then there's the mystery meat. Every ship has some. Strips of something leathery, dark, and ominously odorless. Is it seal, whale, very unlucky goat? No one knows. No one asks. You just slice it thin, heat it over a fire when you can, and chase it with ale. Which brings us to the beverages. Ale is a staple. Light, low in alcohol, and brewed from barley. Mead is more of a luxury. Honey-based, sweeter, sometimes flavored with herbs or berries. Historians still argue whether mead was brought on voyages regularly or reserved for land feasts. But we do know some ships stocked small clay jugs of it, especially for morale. Nothing says, "Please don't mutiny," like a surprise swig of honey wine on week 3. You're handed a small wooden bowl of porridge. It's lukewarm, barely salted, and full of crunchy surprises. Seeds, they say when you grimace, adds texture. You chew slowly, reminding yourself this is better than the infamous emergency flour soup, a watery paste made when literally nothing else remained. Then there's the emergency rations, hidden under the benches in tightly sealed pouches. These are grim. They include hard cheese, dried peas, maybe a handful of nuts, and sometimes dried seaweed. If you're eating those, things are bad. Or you lost a bet. One clever addition, honey cakes. Not the fluffy dessert kind, but dense little bricks made of oats, honey, and fat. Calorie-dense, slow to spoil, and surprisingly tasty if you close your eyes and pretend you're at a feast. Some sailors even believe they bring luck. Others believe they cause indigestion. As usual, Viking logic is somewhere between superstition and survival instinct. Someone nearby starts heating up a stew over a tiny clay brazier. The smell wafts across the ship. Fish, barley, and a suspicious whiff of seaweed. Your stomach growls, despite your brain's protests. And yet, it all works. These aren't gourmet meals, but they're engineered through centuries of cold, hard trial and error to fuel long bodies through longer days. You won't get scurvy, you won't starve, you might dream of fruit, but you'll make it to the other shore. You settle back, your belly warm with gruel, your breath misting in the air. Around you, sailors grunt and pass drinking horns, tearing strips from shared loaves. Someone tells a joke about a merchant who mistook fish glue for porridge, and laughter rolls like a soft wave over the deck. You sip the last of your ale, tuck your bowl into a pouch, and lean against the side of the ship, the ocean stretching endlessly ahead. You wake to the jostling of elbows and the sound of someone cursing mildly at a goat. It's morning again, or maybe just less dark than before. On Viking ships, time is slippery. There's no schedule, just rowing, resting, and reminding yourself not to lean too far over the side. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is a slice of hard bread and a smear of something that tastes like fermented mutton sadness. But it's fuel, and you're not here for luxury. You're here to experience a Viking sea voyage the way it was meant to be. Wet, loud, and slightly pickled. Speaking of which, today you're learning about drinks, and more specifically, how Vikings stayed hydrated without modern plumbing or the miracle of plastic water bottles. You shuffle toward the barrel cluster near midship. They've been lashed tight, their lids sealed with wax and resin. One is tapped open, and a ladle is dipped in. You're handed a scoop of water. It's lukewarm, faintly smoky, and tastes like it's been hanging out with a damp pair of socks. You sip politely. Hydration is hydration. Water on a Viking ship is a gamble. Despite best efforts, barrels can sour. Sea spray seeps in. Mold grows where it pleases. That's why you quickly learn the value of pickled drinks, and pickled everything, really. Vikings didn't have lemons to ward off scurvy, but they had vinegar, salt, and stubborn optimism. One popular liquid? Sour milk. Think yogurt, but aggressive. Kept in leather sacks, it's churned by the ship's motion, and served with the kind of smile that says, "I dare you to complain." It's called skyr, or sometimes surmjolk, and you'd better develop a taste for it, because it's abundant. For the slightly better off, there's ale. Mild, cloudy, and the safest option when the water gets funky. Brewed back home and stored in watertight jugs or small barrels, it's doled out carefully. Not enough to get drunk, imbrietated rowing is a terrible idea, but enough to keep morale above mutiny. Then comes the truly odd hydration solution: pickled sheep parts. Yes, not exactly a drink, but in a way, also not a drink. Vikings stored organs and cuts of meat in brine, so salty it doubled as a thirst suppressant. Occasionally, they'd sip the brine itself, either for salt intake or because they were deeply, tragically bored. Historians still argue whether drinking this brine was common practice or a desperate last resort. But records mention it enough to make you nervously eye the nearest barrel and wonder what else is floating in there. A crewmate passes you a drinking horn, carved, polished, and surprisingly warm. It's been passed hand to hand, filled with ale. You take a cautious sip. It's tangy, thick, and a little gritty. It tastes like something that's both homemade and slightly alive. Still, compared to water that's been warming under the sun for a week, it's a dream. The horn itself is a work of art. Not just a cup, but a symbol. Vikings loved status, and decorated horns, etched with knotwork or inlaid with metal, were prized. They were hard to set down, no flat bottom, so you drank quickly or shared. It was a communal experience, like Viking karaoke, but with less singing and more burping. Around you, the crew settles into their routines. A few lucky ones sip broth made from boiled salted meat. It's thin, greasy, and oddly comforting. Others chew dried seaweed. Yes, that's a thing. Rich in nutrients, easy to store, and surprisingly durable. You try a strip. It tastes like chewing on a mermaid's laundry. The strangest drink on board? A cloudy liquid made from fermented birch sap. Slightly sweet, faintly sour, and full of electrolytes before the word existed. Some say it helped with seasickness. Others say it made it worse. You try a sip. It tastes like rainwater collected in a tree trunk. Not bad, honestly. One elderly sailor pulls out a clay jug wrapped in wool. He uncorks it reverently. Mead. Real mead. The good stuff. Honey, herbs, a touch of elderflower. It's reserved for rituals or moments of celebration. He offers you a mouthful. It's thick, golden, and tastes like warmth, like sunshine on a snowbank. You savor it, knowing you might not taste anything that nice for weeks. You return to your bench and try to remember how many liquids you've sampled in the last hour. None of them refreshing, all of them memorable. You reach for your water skin, lined with waxed leather and hanging from a strap on your belt. You slosh it. Still some left, just barely. And then, of course, there's rainwater. When it rains, everyone scrambles. Open barrels, stretch cloths, catch what you can. Sometimes the ship's sail is tilted just right to channel water down into waiting buckets. One sailor insists on using his helmet as a rain catcher. Another just tips his head back and drinks with his mouth open like a child in a sprinkler. Some ships carried small clay or bronze cups, tied with twine, miniature ladles for scooping out water from narrow containers. You find one and test it. It's delicate, surprisingly pretty, and absolutely terrible for chugging. But dainty sipping does make the sea feel slightly less indifferent to your suffering. As the day wears on, the sun beats down. Your lips crack, your throat dries. The crew sings low songs to distract themselves from thirst. Someone mentions that they once heard of a Viking who drank seawater and went mad, claimed to see sea dragons playing chess on the waves. Historians still argue whether that's metaphor, myth, or just one too many swigs of birch sap. Eventually, someone pulls out a leather pouch filled with something slushy and brown. It's a mixture of crushed berries, melted snow, and fermented whey. It smells like a cheese shop during a thunderstorm. You decline politely. By evening, your mouth tastes like salt and iron, your breath like old bread, and your dreams, when you finally rest, are full of sloshing barrels and horned cups. You fall asleep wondering if hydration was ever meant to be this complicated.
You awaken to the cold slap of wind across your face, and the realization that your cloak, once merely damp, is now fully saturated. Congratulations, you are now marinated. Around you, sailors grumble and stretch stiff limbs. The morning chill is the kind that seeps through wool, leather, and into your bones, then sets up camp and builds a bonfire in your joints. As you nize, hunched like an elderly ferret, you become intimately aware of the materials clinging to your body. Wool. So much wool. Your tunic, your breeches, even your undergarments, everything is woolen. Scratchy, lanolin-rich, and odor-retentive. But this is Viking sea gear, and it's exactly what you need to survive the elements, if not your own stench. Let's talk clothing. Viking voyage wardrobes weren't large. You likely packed one good outfit for landfall and one "please don't let this be mold" outfit for rowing and daily wear. That's it. Luggage space is limited when you're sharing a ship with goats and an unsettling number of salted fish. Your tunic is thick, woven from sheep's wool, and naturally water-resistant, thanks to lanolin, a greasy, waxy substance secreted by the sheep themselves. The result is a cloak that shrugs off rain like a grumpy innkeeper. But comfort? It's like wearing a damp, hairy quilt that's judging you. Historians still debate whether underlayers were common during voyages. Some believe soft linen was worn underneath to reduce itch. Others think sailors simply suffered nobly in silence. Given the amount of wincing you're currently doing, you lean toward the latter. Your cloak is fastened with a simple bronze pin, which you've stabbed yourself with at least twice this week. Cloak pins are notoriously dangerous and strangely decorative, often inscribed with runes or knotwork. This one bears a crude engraving of what might be a wolf or possibly a drunken goose. Artistic ambiguity was a thing. Boots are a whole separate ordeal. Viking sea boots were made of leather, layered and stitched, often stuffed with moss or wool for insulation. They hold water magnificently, because of course they do. And every step on deck squelches with damp finality. On dry land, you'd have at least a fighting chance. Here, they're just portable puddles. Your mittens, also wool, shaped like oven mitts, no separate fingers, just thick lumps of textile that make fine motor skills impossible. Want to tie a knot? Good luck. You'll be using your teeth or asking your neighbor, who, let's be honest, is busy trying not to freeze his eyebrows off. One sailor proudly shows off a belt pouch lined with squirrel fur. For warmth, yes, but also because nothing says "I'm thriving" like accessorizing with rodents. Inside, a single change of socks and what appears to be a carved bone toothpick. Essentials only. Let's not forget hats. Everyone on board wears a hat. It's less a fashion choice, more a survival instinct. Pointed woolen caps, trimmed in fur, pull low over the ears. You tug yours tighter. It's been flattened by days of sleep and sea spray and now resembles a particularly moody mushroom. But for all the damp discomfort, there's logic in every layer. Wool keeps insulating even wet. Cloaks can double as blankets. Tunics can be pulled over heads during storms, and socks, when rotated daily, can almost fool you into believing in dry feet. Almost. Some wear leather jerkins over their tunics, an extra layer for protection and, in theory, to block wind. But unless it's oiled properly, the leather just becomes a stiff sheet of regret. You tried it yesterday, you're still regretting it now. Your neighbor is doing laundry Viking style, rinsing a tunic in seawater and beating it against the deck. Clean is a relative concept. It smells different now, he says proudly. He's not wrong. It smells worse, but definitely different. Personal grooming is minimal, but not absent. Small combs carved from bone or antler are tucked into bolt loops. You spot one now, teeth fine enough to trap lice, which, yes, is exactly their job. Vikings were serious about lice. It's practically a hobby. Historians still argue whether these combs were used daily or only before landfall. But based on the frequency of scratching around you, the answer might be not enough. You adjust your cloak as the wind kicks up. The sail above you snaps like thunder, and the ship leans into a current. Your outer layers are heavy now, soaked through, and you swear they weigh twice as much. Every movement is effort. You understand now why Viking sailors were so brawny. It's not the rowing, it's wearing 10 pounds of soggy wool. Despite the discomfort, there's a strange beauty to it. The cloaks ripple like seaweed in the wind. The fur trims glisten with sea spray. The ship, ringed by stoic, squinting figures, looks like something out of a saga. Rugged, formidable, undeniably itchy. You glance toward the livestock. Even the goats look miserable, their coats puffed up and eyes narrowed. One is wearing what appears to be a repurposed human sock. You choose not to ask. At midday, the sun peeks through the clouds, offering a brief moment of warmth. Crew members stretch their cloaks out to dry, using their own bodies as living laundry lines. Someone jokes that this is the Viking version of a fashion runway. You give your best smoldering stare while dripping seawater. Nailed it. The wind shifts again. The sail catches, and your wool cloak, your eternal damp companion, presses tighter against your skin. You swear you hear it sigh, or maybe that's just your soul. You settle down, cloaked and huddled, your hood pulled low, the damp weight of Viking fashion settling comfortably over your shoulders. You close your eyes, letting the rock of the waves cradle you, and dream briefly of linen, central heating, and a single pair of dry socks.
The sky shifts from blue-gray to storm-waiting charcoal, and the wind hums like a warning. But before the waves start tossing lunch back up where it came from, you notice something curious. A row of small leather pouches tied along the mast pole. You hadn't seen them before, half hidden under a flap of fur. One is stitched with spirals, another with what looks like a crudely drawn whale. Each one, you soon discover, holds a charm, some as odd as they are oddly comforting. Vikings didn't exactly carry rosaries or pocket prayer books, but they did pack charms, talismans, and an unsettling number of carved bones for a voyage. Because when you're crossing endless ocean with no compass, no GPS, and a suspicious amount of wind-related noises, you cling to anything that feels like protection. You sit beside one of the older crewmen, a wiry man whose beard has reached its own philosophical stage of life. He offers you a rune-stamped stone and says, "For fair wind and calm." He doesn't elaborate, and frankly, you don't ask. You hold the stone in your palm. It's smooth, warm from his pocket, and vaguely shaped like a fish. Comforting in a way science can't quite quantify. These aren't just souvenirs. These are practical magic. There's the small whalebone disc carved with runes meant to prevent seasickness. A scrap of seal hide marked with red ochre believed to confuse sea serpents. A seagull feather tied to a child's bracelet to call land, someone whispers. Historians still argue whether Vikings truly believed in the literal presence of sea monsters or if tales of them were exaggerated warnings. But you glance out over the endless slate-colored water and decide it doesn't hurt to be cautious. The ocean, after all, doesn't need to believe in you to swallow you whole. One charm is especially striking: a tiny Thor's hammer carved from antler, tied with a lock of human hair. For strength, you're told. You choose not to ask whose hair it is. Bound with twine, it's hung from the helmsman's seat like a holy relic. He touches it 3 times before changing course. Then there are the more improvised charms. A rabbit's foot, dyed green. A wooden button from a dead uncle's tunic. A fishbone arranged into a shape resembling a rune, or possibly a very hungry bird. Someone once brought a tiny clay frog because they swore it brought rain. They were asked to leave it on the shore. You're handed a pouch and told to fill it with something of yourself. You pluck a loose thread from your tunic and a bit of lint from your sock. It feels silly, like building a wish out of laundry. But you tie it shut and tuck it into your belt, just in case. The ship creaks as the sea begins to shift. Waves grow taller, more insistent. One crashes against the hull, splashing over the side. You flinch instinctively, and so does everyone else. A sailor mutters an incantation under his breath, something in Old Norse you can't decipher. Another flicks salt over his shoulder. It lands in someone's eye. The resulting glare is somehow both painful and deeply traditional. Later, a woman gently unwraps a small cloth bundle and reveals a carved wooden horse. It's simple, primitive, with tiny dot eyes and a scratch mark mane. "To guide the boat," she says softly, placing it near the front. Whether the boat listens is unclear, but nobody moves it. Even the livestock have charms tied to their harnesses. A chicken wears a tiny bronze bell. A goat has a braid of grass around one horn. These aren't just decorations, they're little prayers, wishes, protection spells, or perhaps just attempts to make the universe look the other way. You think about how modern travelers carry crystals, lucky socks, or that weird keychain from their grandma's drawer. Humans haven't changed that much. The methods differ, but the hope is the same. Please let this go well. Please let me get home. Please let me not be eaten by a kraken. There's a particular rune scratched into the mast itself that draws your attention. It looks like a sideways fish and a lightning bolt arguing over which direction to fall. You ask about it. Raid ward, someone says, to keep other ships blind to us. Historians still debate whether runes had magical power or were more symbolic, a kind of psychological armor. Either way, that mast is covered in them, and nobody sanded them off. Some charms are communal. A leather pouch holds bits of bone, seeds, a pinch of ash from someone's home. It's passed around once a week. Everyone holds it briefly, silently, like a moment of quiet between crashing waves. You feel its weight in your hands, surprisingly heavy and strangely warm. You add a pebble you found in your boot. It feels right. And then, sometimes, the sea answers. A gull circling above at the right moment. A wave breaking just short of drenching the sleeping crew. A shift in wind the moment a charm is touched. Is it coincidence? Maybe. But after 3 days at sea, you'd believe a whisper if it came from a well-timed cloud. You fall asleep that night with your little pouch pressed against your chest. The boat rocks like a cradle. Someone nearby hums a tune that might be a lullaby or a curse. It's hard to tell the difference in this language. The last thing you see before drifting off is the carved horse near the bow, bobbing gently with the rhythm of the sea, guiding you forward into the night.
You stretch awake to the scrape of wood on wood, a familiar sound now, and the faint, rhythmic clatter of something being unwrapped. You blink against the early light and catch sight of a man opening a small leather roll lined with tiny compartments. No gold, no treasure maps, just tools. Simple, humble, absolutely vital. He extracts a sliver of flint, a stubby iron striker, and what looks suspiciously like dried moss, and proceeds to spark a fire over a clay dish. You watch, amazed at how quickly it catches with practiced ease. There's no fuss, no drama, just fire, conjured on a ship made mostly of flammable materials. What could go wrong? Welcome to the Viking Toolkit, a pouch of wonders stuffed with items so practical they're almost poetic. You're handed one to examine. It's made of rough leather, stitched unevenly but sturdy. Inside, the contents are a charming blend of function and mystery. A knife, of course, bone-handled, slightly curved, dull from use, but sharp enough for slicing bread, trimming sail rope, or fending off an overambitious chicken. The Viking knife was never flashy, but it was always close. You also find a needle, bone, slender, and stored in a bundle of flax thread. It's not for fashion emergencies. It's for sail repair, sock mending, or stitching up unfortunate injuries. You remember that old sailor who slipped 2 days ago and cut his hand on a fishhook. Someone stitched him up with this exact tool, right there on the deck. No complaints, just a wince, a grunt, and back to rowing. Another pocket holds flint and steel, like the one you saw earlier. Fire was life at sea, warmth, cooking, light. Keeping it going was a shared priority. Sometimes a small clay firebox held a smoldering coal all day, passed around and fed bits of dry moss to stay alive. But here's where it gets interesting. You find a comb. A tiny, beautiful, almost absurdly delicate comb carved from antler. It's decorated with simple lines and dots, carefully etched in. And despite everything, the wind, the rain, the goats, someone cared enough to pack grooming gear. You run your thumb across the teeth of the comb. It's surprisingly sharp. Historians still argue whether these combs were everyday items or more ceremonial. But given how many have been found in Viking graves, it's safe to say they were considered important. Plus, they doubled as lice removal tools, an unpleasant but absolutely critical part of shipboard life. You scratch your head suddenly, just thinking about it. In another pouch, someone reveals a whetstone.
used to sharpen blades, polish arrowheads, and, as you discover, sometimes thrown in mild frustration when an oar breaks. It's small, smooth, and kept in a bit of wool cloth to prevent it from rubbing against the knife's edge in storage. There's a spool of twine, twisted from sinew or plant fibers. It's absurdly strong. It can tie down a sail, patch a hole, or keep that one rower from accidentally tossing someone's boots overboard again. You've been watching them. The tension is brewing. A small carved spoon is tucked into someone else's pouch. Not strictly a tool, perhaps, but important. Nobody wants to share the communal ladle too often. Germ theory didn't exist, but people still understood the concept of, you double-dipped in the stew and now I have regrets. Another sailor unrolls a different kind of kit, this one more specialized. Hooks, lines, and crude weights made from stone and antler. Fishing gear. Because when the dried cod runs low, the sea becomes your pantry. Lines are dropped during calmer moments. Catch something, and it's cause for celebration. Miss, and it's back to sour porridge. And then a final oddity, a small flute, carved from bone, barely larger than a finger. No one admits to owning it, but it's always there, tucked inside the communal chest. Late at night, you've heard it, soft notes drifting over the waves. It's not melodic, not quite, but it's haunting, like a memory you didn't know you had. The tools of a Viking voyage aren't grand. They're not weapons or riches. They're fire starters, sewing kits, personal combs, fishing hooks, and pieces of twine that keep life together, literally and figuratively. They speak of a culture that valued utility, preparation, and perhaps a touch of vanity. You find your own kit tucked under the bench. It's a gift from the ship's quartermaster, who likes your polite silence and your questionable ability to row straight. Inside, flint, a folding knife, and a small wooden charm in the shape of a turtle. You have no idea what it's for. You keep it anyway. A gust of wind blows through the sails, and the ship lists slightly. You tuck the pouch back into your belt and tighten the strap. Everything sways in unison, the ropes, the masts, the people. But it all holds, because everything you need, from soup spoon to fire spark, is here, ready, carried not for luxury, but for life. And as the sky lightens and the day unfolds, you take comfort in the quiet presence of these small, humble objects. A tiny comb, a patch of moss, a bone needle. Each one a thread in the larger fabric of this long, strange voyage.
The sea is calm for once. Just the gentle rise and fall that reminds you this whole ship is a glorified log with ambitions. The crew has eased into that middle voyage rhythm, half asleep, half sore, and wholly resigned to the shared smells of salted meat and damp wool. You take this lull as an opportunity to explore something seldom discussed in heroic Viking sagas, the stuff that didn't quite belong to anyone, but was always there. Tucked under the benches at midship, beneath the oars and spare cloaks, is the communal chest. It's not locked. That would imply someone believed theft was possible on a ship where privacy is a concept as foreign as sunscreen. No, this chest is everyone's and no one's. A collection of oddities, extras, and maybes. You open it slowly. The lid creaks like it's trying to warn you. Right on top, spoons. So many spoons. Wooden, carved, slightly mismatched. Some scorched, others chewed at the ends. Why so many? Because losing your spoon on a Viking voyage is an existential crisis. No spoon means no porridge, no stew, and no way to pretend you're above licking the communal ladle. So extras are packed, swapped, carved mid-journey, or, when desperate, whittled from driftwood and silent prayer. Beneath the spoon layer, you find a bundle of antler dice, small, smoothed from use, marked with little dots or carved runes. Gambling wasn't just recreation, it was how you passed time, settled bets, and occasionally insulted someone's grandfather. You pick up 2 and roll them against the chest floor. A 4 and a mark that might mean doom or soggy breakfast. Hard to say. There's a crude board game too. Small pegs and holes burned into wood. Possibly Hnefatafl, a Viking strategy game like chess, but with higher stakes and less mercy. Historians still argue over the exact rules, which probably changed based on who was winning. Further down, you pull out a lump of beeswax. Not glamorous, but incredibly useful. Used for sealing things, softening leather, or even shaping makeshift earplugs when your neighbor snores like a wounded walrus. Then there's the mystery flute. Ah yes, that bone-carved enigma from earlier. No one plays it when asked, but everyone swears someone plays it at night. You examine it again. It has 4 holes and a faint crack. Maybe it was a gift. Maybe a joke. Maybe it just sounds better when played from a distance, in darkness, by someone you can't quite see. You find a torn bit of sailcloth, carefully folded. Sail repair is serious business, and this is the emergency patch kit. You also spot an extra spool of twine, coiled like a sleeping snake. Someone's written a rune on it, probably to keep it from tangling. It didn't work. A small jar holds fish hooks, most handmade. One is suspiciously bent, as if someone tried to catch something far too large and lived to regret it. Another hook is tied to a bit of sinew line and wrapped in cloth, a ready-made kit for the first sign of fish. A curious pouch catches your eye. You untie it gently. Inside, a small preserved apple. Wrinkled, leathery, and deeply fragrant. A luxury item. Possibly a gift for trade, or maybe someone couldn't bear to eat the last one from home. Either way, it's sacred now. You rewrap it with the reverence of a holy relic. Next, a lump of soapstone carved into a tiny figure. Humanoid, blocky, with one arm clearly broken and hastily repaired with string. You're told it's a lucky charm. He watches the food, someone says. That explains why he's near the spoon pile. You discover a bit of parchment with something scratched on it. Drawings, maybe, or notes from someone bored beyond reason. It's a ship, sort of, a stick figure holding a sword, and a goat wearing a crown. You squint. Definitely a goat. Is it art? Is it a prank? Is it a prophecy? You tuck it back carefully. Best not to disturb whatever that is. A comb. Again. This one broken. Still, someone kept it. It's tucked into a pouch with other bits. A bent needle, a button, half a buckle. Viking hoarding wasn't about clutter. It was preparation. Anything might be useful later, or traded, or turned into a game piece. You admire the commitment to might come in handy. Finally, at the bottom of the chest, a spare cloak. Folded, slightly musty, but dry. And in a place where dry fabric is worth more than gold, it's priceless. It belongs to no one, but everyone understands it's for whoever needs it most. Today, that's a rower with a tear in his own cloak and a sheepish grin. He takes it without asking. No one protests. The chest is closed again. Not locked, never locked, but settled. Its contents shift over time, growing and shrinking like the tide. A spoon is taken, a comb added, a charm buried under twine. It's not just storage, it's memory.
a living archive of every strange, soggy, communal moment this ship has seen. You lean back against the hull, watching the sky blur into ocean. The chest sits quietly nearby, its lid dappled with salt and fingerprints. A box of forgotten things, and yet nothing is truly forgotten. On a Viking voyage, even a broken buckle might be the difference between misery and something resembling comfort.
You're jolted awake not by shouting or crashing waves, but by a sound so mundane it's almost comical, a muffled moo. You blink blearily and sit up, only to find yourself eye to eye with a cow. Yes, a full-sized, mildly annoyed cow, staring at you with the timeless patience of someone who's seen it all and frankly isn't impressed. She shifts her weight, lets out a sigh that smells faintly of wet hay, and resumes chewing. Welcome to one of the more underappreciated realities of Viking sea travel: livestock. You're not just sharing this longship with warriors and merchants, you're also living cheek by jowl with animals, mostly the edible kind, but occasionally, oddly, not. There's logic to it, of course. Preserved food only lasts so long. Salted fish and grain get you through the first leg of the journey, but after a few weeks, nothing beats fresh meat. If, of course, the animal hasn't kicked someone into the sea first. This cow is not just cargo, she's an investment. Her milk, even if rationed, stretches the life of sour porridge. And when her time eventually comes, she'll provide meat, hide, bone, and a whole new wave of shipboard smell. Until then, she stands in her corner, surrounded by sloshing buckets and a goat with boundary issues. Ah yes, the goats, plural. Agile, clever, and endlessly noisy. Their job is simple: eat whatever's edible, bleat at all hours, and produce milk when they feel like it, which isn't often. One has taken a liking to the helmsman's cloak, which now has a bite-shaped hole in it. No one seems surprised. The chickens, half a dozen in a wicker coop, provide eggs and endless drama. They peck, squawk, and occasionally stage escape attempts that rival small military operations. A rooster named Stormbreaker has claimed a spot near the prow and crows heroically into the wind each morning, regardless of actual sunrise. There are also sheep, though not always. On longer voyages, they're preferred for wool and meat. This ship, being mid-range in size, has opted for more compact company. A few pigs might be added at the last port, but not yet. Pigs and longships don't always mix. Too loud, too, let's say, aromatic. Your space is officially compromised. Between the crew, cargo, and animals, you now sleep wedged between a sack of barley and a goat named Snorri. Snorri is not known for personal space or hygiene. Historians still debate how animals were secured during storms. Some claim they were tethered to beams with rope harnesses. Others believe they were simply left to find their own footing, which sounds like a goat-themed disaster waiting to happen. Either way, there's no stall or pen, just shared space and mutual hope. You take a moment to notice the signs of animal integration into ship life. A woven basket of straw, meant for egg collection, is tucked near the shield wall. A trough has been carved into a spare plank and filled with water. Someone has actually swept a corner of the deck clean with a bundle of reeds, presumably to give the cow a slightly less miserable place to stand. One woman knits calmly beside the hen coop, her ball of yarn balanced on a barrel. You ask what she's making. Socks, she says without looking up. You laugh, assuming it's a joke. She doesn't laugh back. Livestock also serve as unofficial entertainment. When the sea is calm and spirits low, sailors place bets on which goat will climb the most crates without falling. Spoiler, it's never Snorri. Snorri falls every time. He is both terrible at climbing and completely unbothered by failure. And the cow? She's developed a mysterious dislike for one particular sailor, who now avoids eye contact and walks the long way around her. Bad milk dreams, he mutters. You don't ask. There's also a quiet dignity to the animals. They don't complain exactly. They accept the motion of the sea, the noise, the cramped quarters. They stand, they wait, they chew. Their calm becomes yours. In a strange way, their presence anchors the ship's humanity. It's hard to feel too heroic when you're sharing your seat with a chicken and brushing hay off your cloak. At night, the animals quiet down, lulled by the rocking of the waves. The cow lies down, her great body radiating warmth. The goats curl beside sacks. One hen lays an egg at midnight to quiet applause. You, meanwhile, try to sleep through a gentle chorus of snorts, clucks, and the occasional bleat. It's oddly soothing, organic white noise, Viking edition. Of course, the downside of livestock is obvious. Waste. It happens, frequently. Strategically placed buckets help. So does pretending the smell is part of the charm. Someone sprinkles dried juniper on the deck in an optimistic attempt at masking odors. It works, briefly. Still, when food runs low and water gets weird, these animals become more than passengers. They are survival. Milk becomes cheese. Eggs are a protein miracle. And, when needed, reluctantly, reverently, they become meat. But not yet. Tonight, they are your fellow travelers, your bed warmers, your begrudging companions. You drift off with your head resting against a barrel, the cow beside you breathing slow and deep. Stormbreaker mutters one last sleepy crow, and Snorri, of course, steps on your foot.
The next morning arrives not with the golden promise of a calm sea, but with a subtle kind of tension, like the ship is holding its breath. There's a breeze, sure, but it keeps changing direction, nudging the sail one way and then the other, like a cat deciding whether or not to knock over a mug. You squint toward the horizon. Just water. No landmarks, no mountains, no helpful "you are here" signs. And yet, somehow, the ship still presses forward, following a route that lives more in memory than on any map. So, how exactly did Vikings navigate long sea voyages without compasses, charts, or Google Maps? The answer lies in a glorious cocktail of sky watching, animal behavior, and what can only be described as ancestral guesswork. At the heart of it all is the sun. On clear days, the crew relies on its position to tell direction. You notice one sailor carrying a flat disc, about the size of your palm, with a carved peg in the middle. It's a sun compass, though no one calls it that. It's simple but effective. Line up the shadows, note the peg's angle, and adjust your course accordingly. It's the original check the GPS, except it involves more squinting and less battery anxiety. But what about cloudy days? That's where it gets mystical. Someone shows you a crystal, clear, smooth, faintly shimmering. This, they claim, is a sunstone, a legendary device said to reveal the sun's position even through overcast skies. You hold it up. Nothing happens. Then you tilt it slightly, and yes, there it is, a faint glow, like the sun whispering from behind the clouds. Historians still argue whether sunstones were myth or real Viking tech, but this crew swears by them. And frankly, you're too impressed to question it. Night navigation? That's for the stargazers. You lie back on the deck and stare upward, watching the sky unfold. The North Star, Polaris, hangs quietly above the ship's bow, a fixed point in a world of movement. One sailor traces patterns in the stars with his finger. "Home's that way," he says, with the kind of confidence you really hope is earned. Of course, the stars don't always show up. Sometimes it's fog, or rain, or just endless gray. That's when Vikings turn to nature's subtler clues. Birds, for instance. Gulls mean you're near land, unless they're just following the ship for crumbs, which they often do. Cormorants stick to shorelines. Puffins suggest islands. On some voyages, the crew brings caged ravens. Release one, and it'll fly straight toward land if any is near. If it circles and returns, bad luck. If it flies off and doesn't come back, grab an oar and follow that bird. You hear tales of reading the waves. Swells and currents shift depending on where you are. The sea has patterns, invisible roads carved by wind and moon. Some sailors say they can smell land before they see it. Wet stone, pine, soil. You sniff. All you get is goat. Maybe next time. Even the color of the water changes. Near Iceland, they say the sea turns steel blue. Closer to the Baltic, it greens. Closer still, and it browns with silt. One older crewman dips his fingers into the water and grunts. 2 days more, he mutters. No one questions him. You don't either. Not after he corrected yesterday's wind shift by licking his thumb. Sometimes someone simply knows. They've made this voyage a dozen times. They've memorized the rhythms, when the sun should rise at a particular bearing, how long the sail should flap before wind returns, the way the ship leans differently when the depth beneath it changes. There's no science in it, just experience. You learn to trust those instincts, even when they seem vague. And then, of course, there's the gut feeling. One sailor insists he gets seasick only when the ship drifts off course. Like a compass in my belly, he boasts while clutching his stomach and turning green. You sincerely hope he's wrong. You try your hand at navigation. You're handed the sun disk, the sunstone, and told to feel the wind with your ears. This advice makes no sense until you realize the ship's tilt and sail tension actually do produce subtle sounds. Whistles, groans, shifts. It's not poetic, it's functional. You listen. The ship creaks left. The sail flaps softly. A gull shrieks in the distance. You point a little west. No one stops you. Maybe they're humoring you. Maybe you're right. Around midday, a shadow passes under the hull. Dark, slow, massive. A whale, perhaps? Or a shoal of fish? You freeze. Others just glance over. Eastward current, someone says. You add that to your growing list of things you pretend to understand. The ship turns slightly. No orders are shouted, no grand gestures. Just a quiet shift, a communal lean, and the longship adjusts course like a bird banking on instinct. There's a kind of beauty in this ancient navigation. No machines, no guarantees. Just the world, your senses, and the knowledge passed down from sailor to sailor, carved in bone and retold over fires. You wonder how many of these secrets have been lost, how many clever tricks were never written down, but lived only in practice. As the sun dips lower, you see someone mark a notch on a bit of driftwood, tracking time, maybe, or just recording a hunch. Every detail matters. The sound of the wind, the angle of a wave, the fact that the cow hasn't mooed in 4 hours. And still, somehow, this ship glides forward. Not lost, not guessing, just remembering. Reading the sea the way others read a book. Slowly, carefully, never skipping a line. You lean back, hands behind your head, the sky above, the water below, and that strange, quiet confidence surrounding you. You don't know where you are, but someone does.
The wind dies a little by late afternoon, just enough to make the sails sag and the oars come out again. Rowing resumes, not with ceremony, but with the same weary rhythm as always. You take your seat, hands wrapping the shaft like it's a familiar grudge, and start pulling. One stroke, then another. The sound is hypnotic. Water slapping wood, a grunt here, a sigh there. Row, rest, row again. The sun moves, your arms ache, time slips. By now, the food's starting to change. You've gone through the easy meals, the early day treats like soft bread and fresh cheese. What remains is more adventurous. The dried fish tastes saltier, harder. The porridge is thinner, grayer. You notice fewer people lingering at meals and more subtle glances at the barrels. Supplies are holding, but barely. So, what happens when the food runs low? You're about to find out. Tonight's supper, stew. You approach the pot with cautious optimism. It smells vaguely edible, mostly onion, maybe some barley. A few chewy lumps bob to the surface. You take a spoonful. It's warm. That's the nicest thing you can say. Someone leans over and whispers, "Emergency seagull stew, probably." They're joking. You think, maybe. Hard to say. You glance upward at a gull circling the mast, who suddenly looks a bit nervous. Emergency food on Viking ships wasn't rare. You hit bad weather, get blown off course, or just miscalculate the number of passengers who insist on seconds, and suddenly you're scraping together meals out of whatever can still float. Hard bread, once merely annoying, now becomes cherished. You dip it into hot broth and pretend it has flavor. You chew slowly. Someone next to you uses a rock to crack theirs open like a nut, effective if violent. You help open one of the final barrels. Inside, dried peas. Not glamorous, but packed with protein. A thick paste is made, then thinned into a soup with seawater, boiled ideally. It's passable, sort of, if you close your eyes. Another barrel holds pickled root vegetables, carrots, parsnips, maybe turnips. They've gone soft, sour, and deeply suspicious. Still, they're vegetables, and that counts for something. You eat a few slices and feel like a health icon. Then there's the lard, thick, off-white, gelatinous, stored in a leather pouch. It's used to fry, spread, or simply consume, straight. For strength, someone claims, taking a spoonful like it's dessert. You manage a small bite and immediately regret most of your life choices. And of course, there's the emergency fish. Fish that's been dried, salted, smoked, possibly blessed, and definitely forgotten in a corner since the last voyage. It's hard, it's oily, it's somewhere between food and a building material. It cracks when you bite it and leaves your lips shiny with regret. You remember a rumor. Someone once caught a bird mid-flight with a net, cooked it with herbs, called it sky pork. It's a legend, of course, probably. You start watching the birds a little more closely anyway. One sailor shows you his secret stash, honey cake. Not much left, but he tears off a corner and shares it. It's dense, chewy, and slightly tangy, probably fermented a bit. Still, it tastes like joy, like something baked near a warm hearth. You feel emotional for no reason and offer him your last bit of dried apple in return. It's not much, but in this floating pantry of decline, it's a feast. There's also talk of bread soup. You soak bits of stale flatbread in hot water, add salt, and swirl until it resembles something you might have seen in a dream once. No one likes it, Everyone eats it. One day, someone finds mold on the barley. Panic ensues. But instead of throwing it out, they scrape off the worst parts, boil the rest, and feed it to the goats. The goats remain unfazed. One even seems smug about it. Historians still argue about just how desperate Viking meals became at sea. Some believe raiding was partially born from hunger. Stop somewhere, acquire food, move on. Others insist the preservation methods were robust enough to avoid such extremes. But between you and this goat, the truth seems somewhere in the middle. Then comes the trading of rations. An old sailor offers half a smoked herring for someone's comb. Another trades dried cheese for a clean sock. A third barters lard for silence after telling a particularly upsetting story involving seaweed and eels. Every scrap matters now. Even the stew that tasted vaguely of leather 2 nights ago is suddenly gourmet. There's talk of boiling fish bones, again, to make broth. And then someone mentions something that makes your stomach clench. The gull stew legend? It's not a joke. Apparently, on a voyage 10 years ago, when storms dragged the crew days off course and the food ran out, a particularly bold sailor caught a gull with his bare hands, roasted it over a broken oar. Tasted like revenge, one crew member recalls. You glance at the bird perched on the mast and whisper a soft apology. But the human spirit, particularly the Viking flavor of it, is resilient. Meals shrink, flavors fade, textures become increasingly questionable, but morale somehow holds. Jokes get darker. People start naming the dried peas. Someone arranges flatbread pieces into runes and reads their future. You will eat fish. Again. You begin to understand what it means to endure. Not just through storms, but through monotony. The same textures, the same tastes. The slow shift from what shall we eat to what can we chew without losing consciousness. By now, you've mastered the art of stretching a single spoonful into 10 tiny bites. You've convinced yourself that boiled bark might possibly be edible. You've stared into a cup of thinned-out lard soup and said, "You know what, this is fine." And when someone passes you a strip of dried meat that smells like despair and tastes like an old shoe left in a tide pool, you smile, chew, and give a thumbs up. Because you're a Viking now, and you're going to make it. Probably.
Night falls, and with it comes the rarest treasure of all, a sliver of silence. The sea, for once, is gentler than your bed back home, assuming your bed back home also creaked, shifted, and occasionally smelled like smoked fish. But here, under a sky salted with stars and the steady groan of wood adjusting to waves, you lie back and try to sleep. Try being the operative word. Sleep aboard a Viking longship isn't so much a restful experience as it is a delicate negotiation with physics, livestock, and your own spine. You find your spot between a coil of rope and someone's sack of turnips. It's surprisingly comfortable if you don't move, breathe, or acknowledge that the turnips are slightly damp. There's no mattress, no blanket. Your cloak doubles as a cover and pillow. Your boots stay on, partly because they're impossible to remove without tools, and partly because you're afraid someone might take them for firewood in the night. You curl onto your side, knees drawn in, hands under your chin, like a very itchy baby seal. Around you, bodies shift in synchrony. Everyone has their preferred sleep strategy. Some flat on their backs with arms crossed like dramatic ghosts, others in a seated slump, heads bobbing like chickens in slow motion. A few snore immediately. One guy near the rudder starts snoring before he's even fully laid down. It's a talent. Another hums himself to sleep with a half-remembered saga about a sea witch who turned her enemies into kelp. You're not sure if it's meant to be comforting, but you fall asleep somewhere between verse 3 and the ominous bubbling noises. Rest on a longship happens in shifts. There's always someone rowing, someone watching, someone poking the fire in the clay brazier. You get a few hours at a time, if you're lucky. The motion of the ship rocks you like a cradle, or a washing machine on the spin cycle. The deck beneath you is cold and alive. It breathes, it groans. It transmits every footstep, every shifting goat hoof, every slosh of water against the hull. You'd complain, but you're too tired to care. The goat, you realize, is also asleep, tucked into a corner like a judgmental woolen lump. Sometimes you're roused by the sound of vomiting. Seasickness doesn't always announce itself with dramatic flair. More often, it just leaks out of someone quietly into a bucket or over the side. You offer a pat on the shoulder, a sip of water, a nod of shared misery. And then, the cold. Oh, the cold. It creeps into your bones like gossip, subtle at first, then all-consuming. Your fingers curl tighter, your breath fogs. You tuck your nose beneath your cloak and dream of fire, sun, and socks that haven't been soaked since day 3. Historians still argue whether Vikings used animal furs as blankets or cloaks only. But you've layered every woolen scrap you have, and still your toes ache with chill. Someone near you mumbles in their sleep about warm stones and hot mead. You mumble back, "Tell me where." But in between the discomforts, those precious in-betweens, you drift. And in those moments, the dreams come. Not modern dreams, not the ones about showing up to school late or finding your teeth have turned to jelly beans. Viking dreams are stranger, stronger. You dream in sabes, of dragons with seaweed beards, of wolves the size of mountains, of fjords that whisper secrets only you can hear. You dream of landfall, of stepping onto solid ground and feeling the earth not move beneath you, of fresh bread and firelight and people who smell less like damp goat. And sometimes, just sometimes, you dream of rowing. Your hands mimic the motion, even in sleep. Left, right, pull. You're back on the oar, back in the sea, part of the ship. Your body has memorized it, absorbed it, become it. The snoring continues, a rolling tide of nasal wind. One sailor murmurs something about his mother. Another laughs softly in his sleep. You think he might be dreaming of stew. A man near the mast is praying, not loudly, just words under breath, rhythmically, like a lullaby to the gods. He holds a carved pendant, Thor's hammer again, and strokes it with his thumb. You don't need to believe in the gods to feel comforted by the gesture. And all around, the ship holds you, cradles you, not gently, not lovingly, but consistently, like an old friend who doesn't really do affection, but still shows up to help you move furniture. You wake briefly when someone stirs beside you, just a shuffle, a sniff, maybe a whispered curse about a splinter. Then stillness again. Eventually, the sky lightens. Sleep is over, or at least paused. Someone shakes your shoulder. You blink against the light, roll your shoulders, and sit up. There's a dent in your hip where a knot of rope pressed all night. Your neck clicks when you tilt it. Your cloak is colder than ice somehow, and your boots smell like wet firewood. But you slept, sort of, maybe even dreamed. And on a Viking longship, that counts as luxury. You stand, stretch, groan, and look out over the endless sea. It's another day, another shift, another bowl of mystery stew, and another dozen hours of wind, water, and wondering if you packed enough socks. But for now, just for a moment, your body still holds the softness of sleep. Your breath still follows the rhythm of the waves. And despite everything, you almost feel rested. Almost.
The first raindrops arrive with no warning, just a sudden whisper on the sail,
a soft hiss on the sea. Then, a moment later, the sky opens. The longship shudders as a gust cuts across the water, and a collective groan rises from the crew, not from fear, but from the deeply spiritual exhaustion of getting wet again. You're halfway through your shift when the storm hits. It starts with wind, not a breeze, a force. One that grabs the sail like a child yanking a curtain and flings the ship off its easy rhythm. The prow slams against a rising wave, and your whole body snaps forward, the oar slipping from your hand. There's shouting, but no panic. Everyone knows what to do. Ropes are pulled, sail reefed, benches cleared of anything that might go flying. The livestock have already hunkered down, except for Snorri the goat, who has somehow gotten himself stuck in a barrel again. The rain becomes a curtain. The sea turns hostile, black, heaving, spray leaping high enough to slap your face even before you lean over the edge and lose your lunch. And you will. Let's just accept that now. Viking seasickness is no joke. You cling to a railing that's slick with seawater and your own regrets. One moment, you're hoping the wind shifts. The next, you're whispering apologies to Odin between heaves. It's humbling and deeply communal. One sailor pats your back, then promptly joins you in solidarity. A bucket is passed around with quiet reverence. No one judges. Everyone suffers. Historians still argue whether Vikings had methods to combat seasickness. Some mention chewing on dried herbs like angelica or fennel root. Others suggest charms, runes carved into wood, tied with thread, worn around the neck. One sailor presses a small rune into your palm. "Hold this," he says. "It works." It doesn't, but you appreciate the gesture. As the storm peaks, the ship rises and falls like a mythological beast, lurching forward, dipping, climbing again. You cling to a beam and try to remember how many goats are still on board. You definitely saw one disappear under a blanket. Hopefully it wasn't yours. And through all this, stories begin. Vikings didn't just endure storms, they sang through them, chanted, recounted tales to distract from the nausea and terror. Tonight, someone starts reciting a sea saga, voice raised above the wind. A tale of a ship that sailed into the mouth of a sea giant and emerged from its ear days later. Of a captain who wrestled a thundercloud into submission. Of a crew who cooked soup on a lightning bolt. You don't believe a word, but in that moment, soaked, shivering, hanging on for dear life, it helps. One man starts singing a lullaby. Another beats a rhythm on the side of a barrel. Someone near the bow begins to laugh, loud and wild, until the rest of the crew joins in. It's not madness, it's survival. Humor becomes armor. If you can laugh through it, you're still winning. You taste salt, not from food, but from the sea itself, soaking your lips, your hair, your very soul. Your cloak is a sodden mess. Your boots now squish when you walk. And yet you start to feel, beneath the cold, the sickness, the dampness, a strange peace. The storm begins to break. It doesn't end with drama. No thunderclap, no final wave, just a slow retreat. The wind calms, the rain thins. The sail flutters like a heartbeat easing, and suddenly it's quiet. The ship lists gently. You sit back on your heels and blink at the faint line of moonlight breaking through the clouds. Around you, the crew exhales. Someone offers a chunk of dried fruit. It tastes like victory. The brazier is relit. Someone boils water. You're handed a cup of something hot, herbs and broth, salty and sharp. You sip slowly, grateful to taste something that isn't bile. You look around. The ship is battered but afloat. Everyone's soaked, but no one's gone overboard. The cow is standing again. The goats are sneezing.
Snorri appears from under a bench, triumphant, if slightly dazed. You curl back into your cloak, damp and heavy, but now familiar, like a second grumpy Stin. The stars begin to return. And now, in the post-storm hush, someone begins a new saga. This one's about a crew who faced a storm so fierce the gods themselves turned away. But they kept going, shoulder to shoulder, stubborn as barnacles. And when the storm passed, they laughed so loudly the sea trembled. You close your eyes and smile, because tonight that story feels a little less legend and a little more like memory.
The sun rises late, low, and reluctant, casting long shadows across the deck. The storm may have passed, but the air still feels heavy, like it remembers. You sit beside a pile of half-dry cloaks, combing tangles out of your hair with fingers that haven't been properly warm in days. That's when someone unrolls the trade bundle. It's not large, just a fur-wrapped package tucked into a waterproof bag, tied with knots so precise it takes 2 people to open it. Inside, the treasure trove, not of gold or jewels or glittering loot, but of things that might get you food, shelter, or a warm fire in a distant land. Welcome to the Viking barter chest. You're surprised by what you see. This isn't your stereotypical hoard of swords and stolen goblets. It's beads. Amber beads, smooth and golden like frozen sunlight. Glass beads too, blue, green, striped with fire-colored swirls. Vikings traded far and wide, and these trinkets, though small, held enormous value in the right market. One sailor holds up a string of them, letting the sun catch the colors. "Got this in Frisia," he says. "Swapped it for a sack of salt and a broken buckle." He sounds proud. He should. In trade, the story is half the currency. There are also bits of silver, some whole coins, others hacked into pieces. Hack silver, they call it. Currency by weight, not mint. A silver bracelet might be chopped into 3 to pay for a meal, a service, or safe passage. You pick one up. It's cool, soft-edged, stamped with a foreign king's face. You wonder if that king knows his likeness is currently being used to bribe cavern keepers for extra stew. Tucked between layers of fur are more unusual items. Chunks of walrus ivory, carved with spirals and runes. Highly prized in distant markets, especially to the south, where such creatures are exotic curiosities. One piece has been whittled into a comb handle, unfinished but beautiful. And then there are the textiles. Squares of cloth, coarse wool dyed with woad, or fine linen edged with embroidery. Viking weavers knew their craft, and a well-dyed bolt of cloth could be worth more than a blade. You feel the fabric. It's scratchy, yes, but the color, a deep indigo blue, has held against salt, sun, and time. Someone reveals a set of bone needles strung together on twine. Lightweight, useful, and rare in some regions. Another trader has small wooden toys, a horse, a bird, a strange creature with 3 horns. For the merchant's children, he shrugs. What's striking is how little of it feels luxurious. This isn't showboating. These are objects of use, beauty, portability. A Viking merchant, or raider, or sailor, or farmer turned temporary explorer understood that value was not always about shine. It was about desire, need, novelty. You pack what you think they will want,
not what you think is impressive. Historians still debate the reach of Viking trade. Some point to finds in Baghdad, Constantinople, even India. Others caution that these were rare outliers. But here, in this chest, you see the network. Beads from the east, furs from the north, silver stamped with strange letters. It's global, in a soggy, wool-wrapped kind of way. Then there are the things carried not to trade, but to show. Social currency. Like a brooch, massive, ornate, heavy as your head after 3 days of salt herring. It's pinned to a cloak for display only, a sign of status. Don't ask the price, it says. Ask who I am. Some carry charms to trade, amber carved into faces, bone pendants shaped like fish, tiny glass animals. Not valuable to everyone, but to the right person, at the right time, worth a week of food, or a place to sleep, or safety. One man unwraps a single item, a needle case, delicately carved, capped in bronze. Inside, 6 pristine bone needles and a bit of waxed thread. He holds it like it's sacred. For the right buyer, he murmurs. You don't ask what he means. Some trades aren't about profit, they're about timing. There are goods for service too. Whetstones, soapstone bowls, fishing hooks still wrapped in oilcloth. Even small blades, more utility than weapon. Carefully packed, never flaunted. At the bottom of the bundle, a pouch of salt. That's when you understand. Salt is worth its weight in, well, not gold, but something close. Preserves meat, flavors everything, sometimes pays debts. In some places, it is currency. This pouch is double wrapped and handled like glass. The bundle is packed back up, tied again, sealed tight. It'll only be opened again when land appears, or if desperate need arises. One sailor glances out at the horizon. Maybe 3 days more, he says. You're not sure if he's hopeful or worried. But what stays with you isn't the amber or the silver. It's the little things. A doll, carved from driftwood, eyes painted on with soot. A strip of dyed leather, braided like a bracelet. A crude bone ring. These weren't just for barter. They were reminders, stories in object form. And in a world where you carry your world with you, such things are anchors. You rest your head back against the hull and imagine the stories these objects have passed through. Hands, markets, firesides. Each one traded, gifted, lost, found, tucked into a new pouch. On this endless sea, everything you own might one day become someone else's treasure.
By now, the voyage has carved itself into your bones. You move with the rhythm of the sea, your knees brace before the ship even dips, and your dreams smell faintly of goat and pickled herring. You've endured storms, slept beside livestock, rationed seagull-adjacent stew, and now your hand rests on something smooth, solid, and cool. An axe. Not for chopping firewood, not for crafting. This one is different, sleek, balanced, and heavy in a way that says, just in case. Because even on a peaceful voyage, even when you're headed for trade, not conquest, no Viking ship leaves home without its blades. You glance around. They're everywhere, tucked into belts, lashed to bedrolls, hidden under cloaks. Axes, mostly, short-handled for fighting in close quarters. Some long-handled for leverage. Every one of them sharpened to a gleam. Some carry swords, expensive, rare, usually owned by someone with at least one good saga to their name. Daggers peek from boots, spearheads glint from under tarps. It's not that the crew expects trouble, but they expect possibility. You don't cross seas without preparing for the sea monsters, be they real or human-shaped. Someone sits beside you, hunched over a whetstone, pulling a small knife across it in long, whispering strokes. Shink, shink. The sound is steady, oddly soothing. He's been sharpening that knife every night. Whether it's for a trade, a fight, or just the comfort of routine, you're not sure. Whetstones are passed around like mugs of ale. Sharpening isn't just maintenance, it's meditation. A slow, repetitive ritual that brings focus and comfort. One sailor even sings as he works, a droning hum in time with the scrape. It doesn't matter that the blades might never be used, they must feel ready. Vikings didn't believe in blunt anything. You check your own knife, a stubby affair with a worn bone handle. You haven't used it for anything deadlier than cutting cheese and opening stubborn knots, but you've grown oddly attached to it. It's not pretty, not even particularly sharp, but it's yours. You stroke the edge with the whetstone just once, more for pride than danger. Historians still argue whether Vikings carried weapons openly on peaceful trade voyages. Some say no, too provocative. Others say yes, because being disarmed at sea is like forgetting your pants at a wedding, unforgivable. Based on this crew, everyone's armed, even the goat might be packing. You peek into the communal gear stash again. There's a spearhead wrapped in leather, a small round shield painted red and white, and, most impressively, a helmet. Not with horns, that's pure theatrical nonsense, but with a simple metal nose guard and signs of hard use. It's dented in one corner. Probably a story there. You don't ask. One sailor keeps a seax, a wide-bladed knife, practically a short sword, strapped across his back. It's etched with a line of runes, worn smooth from handling. He never draws it, never even looks at it, but it's there, part of him, like a second spine. Weapons on a Viking ship are multi-purpose. Yes, they're for fighting, but also for status, for ceremony, for habit. Some are inherited, some are borrowed, some are scavenged. One guy claims his axe once belonged to his grandfather, who chopped down a tree cursed by a troll. You don't question it. Some crew members carry just-in-case weapons with a kind of casual paranoia. A small blade tucked into a boot, a sharpened stick hidden in a satchel. One man proudly displays his weapon of choice, a sling. Just a strip of leather, a few stones, and a wild gleam in his eye. You decide not to sit near him again. You wonder how many of these weapons will actually be used. Hopefully none. This voyage has been, so far, uneventful in terms of violence. But you remember what the storyteller said on the second night. Peace is what you hope for. Axes are what you pack for. There's even an unofficial weapon inspection once a week. Not formal, just an excuse for everyone to pull out their gear, show it off, sharpen it in unison, and quietly judge each other's craftsmanship. You participate with your little knife. No one laughs. Someone even nods approvingly. It's a surprisingly supportive environment considering the sharp objects involved. And then there's practice. Late one afternoon, when the wind is low and the sea calm, a few sailors gather at the prow for a round of friendly sparring. Blunted blades, slow movements, lots of grunting. They laugh, joke, correct each other's stances. It's not a fight, it's a rehearsal. You watch, impressed. Even the goat seems curious. One woman moves like she was born with a sword in hand. Her footwork is fluid, her balance perfect, even on the rocking deck. She's not flashy, just precise. You hope she's on your side in any future encounters. There's talk, too, quiet, under breath, of what might lie ahead. Rival ships, unfriendly ports, bandits hiding along riverbanks. Most likely, nothing happens. But everyone agrees. Better to have a blade and not need it than to need one and be holding a spoon. Before sleep, you check your knife again. It's still there, still dull, still comforting. You tuck it under your cloak and curl up beside the now snoring cow. You don't expect danger, but you're ready for it, just in case.
You smell land before you see it. It arrives quietly, sometime in the early hours, when the sky is still that soft, bruised purple, and the sea has calmed to a reflective hush. A shift in the wind, a breath of damp earth, something green. Not the biting salt and rot of the open ocean, but the warm, almost grassy scent of something else, something solid. The crew begins to stir, not suddenly, not with any fanfare, just the slow, collective realization that the voyage is almost over. No one says it outright, no one dares to jinx it, but they move a little faster, stand a little straighter. Even the goats bleat more enthusiastically, possibly sensing a chance to finally step on grass again. Then someone in the crow's perch, really just a carved plank lashed near the mast, shouts the words everyone's been hoping to hear. "Land ho!" And just like that, the energy shifts. People who've barely moved for days suddenly leap to their feet. Cloaks are straightened, beards are combed, boots are relaced with purpose. The cow is wiped down with a damp cloth. It's all very ceremonial for people who've been living in what is essentially a floating, salty closet. You peer ahead. The coastline is faint, just a smear of dark green against a brighter sky. Trees, hills, maybe smoke from distant cookfires. Whatever it is, it's not water. And after days of sea, waves, storms, and soup that may or may not have included seagull, you'll take it. Packing begins in earnest. The communal chest is reorganized. Trade bundles are inspected, repacked and tightened with fresh cord. You help fold spare cloaks and stack empty barrels. Even the half-broken spoon someone refused to part with gets tied into a pouch like it's a holy relic. Then there's the matter of appearances. You haven't bathed in, 9 days? 10? Who's counting? But people start to scrub up anyway. Cloaks are shaken out, hair is braided, sometimes hastily. A few even splash precious water on their faces, and someone, miraculously, produces a comb that isn't missing teeth. The Viking version of glamour. Even Stormbreaker the rooster is given a once-over. He resists, he squawks, he flaps, but eventually he too is made presentable. You reach into your bundle and pull out your arrival tunic. You forgot how not itchy it is. You put it on with reverence. It's still wrinkled, but it smells less like goat, and that's a win. Weapons are checked and buckled in, a little more visibly now. Not in a threatening way, just enough to say, we come in peace, but we also come with axes. The ship begins to slow, the sail drawn in. Oars are dipped back into water. The crew rows gently, evenly, like they've done this dozens of times, which they have. Closer now, you see people on the shoreline. Tiny figures at first, then larger. They're watching, waiting. Some ships are welcomed, others are evaluated. But the longship is a known silhouette. You glide into view, prow high, shields lined along the sides like a dragon's ribs. You remember what you're carrying.
Beads, cloth, salt, stories. Not just trade goods, but proof of where you've been. The smell of the sea is still on you. Your boots still squeak. But here you are, salt-streaked and sunburned, standing among sailors who have become something like family. And you're ready to step on land again. The anchor is dropped with a final clunk. Ropes are tossed. The longship bumps gently against the dock, or maybe just a packed shoreline, depending on where you've landed. It doesn't matter. You pause before stepping off. You glance back at the ship, its sail now limp, the shields still in place, the faint smoke still curling from the brazier. There's a smear of dried stew on the deck near your usual sleeping spot. The cow looks triumphant. Snorri has somehow tangled himself in a net again. And then you step onto land again. It's a strange feeling. The ground is still. Your legs, accustomed to the endless sway, wobble for a moment. The earth feels unnaturally steady. You laugh at the absurdity of it. Others do too. The dock becomes a parade of stumbles, shuffles, and exaggerated balance poses. But then you're standing, really standing. Dry socks, solid ground, air that smells like pine and smoke and home, even if this isn't your home. You take a deep breath. It's over. The voyage is done, and somehow you're still a little damp.
Now, let's slow everything down. You sit on a quiet stone near the shore, the longship just behind you. The water laps gently, a rhythm you've come to know intimately. No longer crashing, no longer hostile, just a whisper, a memory of the sea. The sky is soft now, washed in pastels, the sun warm but no longer harsh. You feel it on your face, gently drying what remains of the salt on your skin. Around you, voices grow quieter, footsteps soften. The world, for the first time in days, is still. Your cloak, finally dry, rests like a blanket on your shoulders. Your boots are loose. Your hands, so used to gripping oars and holding bowls of gruel, now lie open on your lap, relaxed. The ache in your shoulders has become something familiar, even comforting. You look out over the horizon. The sea you crossed now feels like a distant dream. You remember the sound of snoring sailors, the rattle of barrels, the clink of spoons, the endless flapping of the sail. But it's far away now, like a story someone told you once in a half-sleep. Your eyes begin to close. The land cradles you now, firm beneath your feet. The voyage is behind you, but the quiet strength it gave you lingers. Let yourself rest now. Let the waves fade. Let the stars return. You've made it home. End of script. Sweet dreams.